For thousands of years, the Great Pyramids of Egypt have just been sitting there, these silent, incredible monuments from a world we can barely imagine. And they've left us with one of history's biggest questions. They're these icons of human genius, right? But the real story of how they were built, well, that's been buried for a long, long time.
Okay, so let's get right into it. This is the core mystery, isn't it? How on earth did they move stone blocks that weighed multiple tons across miles and miles of what's now just empty desert? Well, in this explainer, we're going to follow the clues, just like a team of modern-day scientific detectives who think they've finally cracked the case.
Solving this puzzle really starts with getting your head around the sheer scale of the problem. The logistics of moving those stones they're mind-boggling. And for centuries, people have had all sorts of theories. But actual, hard evidence? That was always the missing piece.
Now, the leading theory for a long time was that they couldn't have dragged these stones all the way over land. It just makes sense they would have used water, right? But that was all it was, a hunch, kind of like a ghost story that historians would tell. There was no map, no real proof of a big waterway right where they would have needed one.
This quote from Professor Eamon Ghanem, who actually led this new study, just hits the nail on the head. The whole waterway theory was full of these huge question marks. Was it just a little canal? Was it a giant river? Was it even close enough to the pyramids to be useful? The trail had basically gone cold, buried under thousands of years of sand.
So, how do you even begin to pick up a trail that's thousands of years old? Well, you put together a team of modern scientific detectives, and you arm them with something a lot more powerful than just shovels and brushes.
And this was no small operation. It was this huge cross-continental effort. It was led by the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, but it brought together top experts from the US, from Egypt, and even from Australia. A truly global team to solve a global mystery.
Okay, so you've got your team. Now, how do you find something that's been completely wiped off the map? You can't just start digging randomly in the Sahara, right? No, you need a seriously high-tech forensic toolkit to see what's hiding beneath the surface.
So the investigation basically unfolded in 3 key steps. First, they used radar satellites way up in space to literally peer right through the top layer of sand. Then, with that data, they came down to the ground and used geophysical surveys to map out anything that looked interesting. And finally, the most important part, they drilled down, pulling up these long cores of sediment to get their hands on actual physical proof of an ancient riverbed.
And this is the aha moment. The radar confirms it. There, running right along the foothills where all the pyramids stand, was the unmistakable outline of a huge buried river. They had found it. The ghost had left a fingerprint.
So what did they actually find buried under all that sand? Well, this wasn't just some little stream. This was a true mega waterway, and now it has a name that honestly couldn't be more perfect.
They're calling it the Ahramat branch, and Ahramat is the Arabic word for pyramids. So it's quite literally the Pyramids River, a name that leaves absolutely zero doubt about what it was used for.
The scale of this thing is it's staggering. This lost river ran for 64 kilometers. That's almost 40 miles. A major river system just completely wiped off the map by time and nature.
And it was incredibly wide. In some spots, it was up to 700 meters across. That's nearly half a mile wide. So we're not talking about a gentle stream here. This was a powerful, navigable river that could carry the heaviest cargo you can imagine.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. 31. A string of 31 pyramids, including the famous Giza complex, were built directly on the banks of this lost river. That is not a coincidence. All of a sudden, their locations make perfect sense. They weren't built out in some isolated desert. They were built on prime riverfront property.
And like Dr. Suzanne Onstein, one of the co-authors, says here, the river wasn't just a road, it was the engine. The ancient Egyptians were brilliant engineers. They could actually harness the river's current to do the heavy lifting for them. It's all about working smarter, not just harder.
So, okay, we've found the river. But how does this finally close the case on one of the biggest questions in archaeology? Well, because the timing is absolutely perfect. The sediment cores proved that the river was flowing and powerful between about 4,700 and 3,700 years ago, which is the exact window when all the major pyramids were being built. It was there right when they needed it the most.
And this discovery just completely reframes the whole mystery. I mean, before, we were all wondering, why would anyone build this huge cluster of monuments in such a dry, difficult desert? And now we have the answer. The river wasn't just near the pyramids, it's the whole reason they are where they are. It was the logistical lifeline that made everything else possible.
So, the verdict is pretty clear. The Ahriman branch was the construction superhighway for the ancient world's most ambitious project. It was the vital artery that made it all happen. And then, it just vanished, choked out by a major drought and buried by thousands of years of sandstorms, hiding its secret right up until now.
You know, finding the Ahriman branch really proves that these astonishing pieces of our history can stay completely hidden, literally right under our feet. It solves one massive mystery, but it also opens up this incredibly exciting new question. If a 40-mile-long river can hide in plain sight, what other wonders are still out there, just waiting to be discovered, right beneath the sand?